suspect!
Coming to get you, Bobber.
Hi guys, my name's Barry and welcome back to the channel. Scream has just had its first weekend at the US box office. Now we're not going to dive into the international box office just now because we don't have the full numbers for it just now. But we know that at the weekend, not the 4-day weekend, but for Scream's or Scream 5's weekend, it was $30.6 million. Now, a lot of people say that's fantastic, and it is. It's really good. We've got to remember that this is the first time a Scream movie's came out in a January, which is not the best month for any type of movie. And obviously it is the pandemic as well. So we have to take that into consideration when we're discussing is it a success or not. Now the movie did cost $24 million. So realistically, it made its money back in the first weekend. That's great, obviously minus ticket sales, marketing, etc. But overall, it is a good result for a Scream movie, especially a fifth movie in a franchise. But I've seen a lot of people say that it's fantastic. It's one of the most successful Scream movies of all time. And I've done a bit of calculation, and it turns out it's nowhere near the most successful Scream movies of all time in terms of its first weekend. So what I'm going to do is, again, this is just my calculations, guys. The movie could still make millions of money after today. It could make an amazing box office next weekend and the weekend after that, etc. I'm just going by the very first weekend for all the 5 Scream movies. I'm going to break it down. So I'm going to tell you the budget for all the movies, which you probably already know. I'm going to tell you the weekend box office for each movie. I'm going to have to adjust for inflation as well so that I can determine where the movies will lie. But what I'm going to do, and ultimately what I'm going to do is per theatre, because the movie opened up to different numbers of theatres for each Scream movie, so it wouldn't be fair to suggest, for example, Scream 1 opened up to just over 1,400 seats, whereas Scream 3 opened up to over 3,400 seats. So I'm going to break it down per theatre, I should say, and that will give us the exact number of what came top and what came bottom. In 5th place is Scream 4. Now that movie made $18.6 million at the box office in its first weekend. Now adjusted for inflation, that is $23 million. So it's made $23 million, but it opened in 3,305 theatres around the US. So that gives us an average of $6,960 for a theatre on opening weekend. And at number 4 is Scream from 1996. That made $6.3 million in its first weekend, which is an adjusted inflation of $11.1 million. It only opened up to 1,413 theatres around the US, giving it an average of $7,855. Now that is quite low for probably the best movie in the franchise, but we do have to remember it did open up to just over 1,400 theatres, and at the same time nobody knew what this movie was at the time. You know, you get sequels after that and it was established at the time, but that's the reason, or I'm assuming that's the reason why Scream didn't make as much as we thought it might have. And at number 3 is Scream from 2022. It made $30.6 million at the weekend, no adjusted inflation required, and it opened up to 3,664 theatres around the US, giving it an average of $8,351. And at number 2 is Scream 3. That opened up to $34.7 million in its first weekend, and adjusted for inflation, that gave it a whopping $56.2 million. It opened up to 3,467 theatres, giving it a massive $16,210 per screen. And at number 1 is Scream 2. That made $32.7 million in its first weekend. That gave it $56.8 million adjusted for inflation, and it opened up to 2,663 theatres around the US, giving it a way ahead of $21,330 per theatre. Something about Scream 2 that was also very impressive was it cost $24 million to make, whereas Scream 3, for example, cost $40 million to make. So did Scream 4, that also cost $40 million. So Scream 2 had the second joint lowest budget, but that's way out ahead of anyone. So yes, although Scream from 2022 was a big success, we've got Scream 2 that made over double, almost triple of what the new Scream movie made in its first weekend. Now, like I said, the new Scream movie is a January release. It is the 5th movie in a franchise, and it also got released during the pandemic. So this video isn't knocking the new Scream movie because it made a great amount of money for the budget that it cost and for the times that they were in just now. But I just wanted to get this video out there just to say that it's nowhere near the top, but it's also nowhere near the bottom in terms of box office for the first weekend for the Scream movies. What do you think of those numbers, guys? Are you surprised by the numbers? I was quite surprised by Scream 2 and 3. I didn't think they were going to make as much as they did, but looking at the inflation, etc., I was pleasantly surprised that a second or third movie can really massively outdo the first movie in a franchise like Scream. But leave your comments down below, guys. Let me know what you think of those numbers, and I'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.